world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramée, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, May 3rd, 2021. It's May. It's gonna be May. After all this April, it's gonna be May, Duane.
It indeed, it is May, the May the 3rd, in fact. Happy to get here. Weather's warming up, getting towards the end of the European seasons, which might free up some time, although we have a European Championships, and there's no time. There's not.
There's no time. Also, yes, you're right. Some European leagues have actually wrapped up their champions in the weekend. We'll talk about that more tomorrow on Tuesdays Are for Europe. But Inter has won the Scudetto. Also, Ajax has clinched the title in the Eredivisie, and we'll talk about that tomorrow on Tuesdays Are for Europe. But how was your soccer weekend, Duane?
Quieter than normal because I wasn't on Twitter, and the reason I wasn't on Twitter was, of course, I was supportive of the blackout that's happening in England, and will remain off Twitter till 7 p.m. tonight, which is midnight British time. So it's a bit of a different experience that I'm not used to. It's funny. It's like old school, man. It's like how I used to watch sports back in the day when I didn't have to share every thought of mine. And I'm still not used to it, Kevin. I'm still not used to it. I still wake up going, I should tell Twitter that. Wait, I can't till tomorrow. But it's a good cause, so I'm happy to do it. But it's weird to not do it.
Which is why we didn't do a show on Friday, and today we are doing a show. But as you'll see, Duane will take part later on Twitter, not live. And to me, it's an interesting aspect of also this worldwide movement now. It's not just soccer, multiple sports, multiple different aspects of the sports, from journalists to teams themselves to the leagues. And yes, it is important to talk about racism and the fact that there is still racism, and to stop the online abuse and to stop these comments. And we do need more done by platforms when comments are made, especially on things, to be able to. That's the difficult part, but it has to find a way to administer these things and to make sure that you kick it out of the sport, but of the platforms and the online lives of where we all live, kind of. So,
no, absolutely. Look, I felt strongly that even though I'm not an English-based journalist covering the game, I do talk about the English game a lot, and I felt that even my small little bit of interaction on a Saturday, a lot of my followers do interact with me while we're talking about the Premier League games. Even that little bit, I think, matters. If everyone does that, you notice it on Twitter, and it takes away the enjoyment. And you need to have the platforms understand that if they don't do something about it, it's not that people aren't going to want to seek out what that is, that interaction, that human connection that happens during games. But there are ways that this is an era where you can create a social media platform that was only for football. Like there's stuff that could happen if they don't get their stuff in order, and it's real simple. We're not asking for much. We're asking for overtly racist stuff to be punished appropriately, and it's not happening in the minds of most. So, this is a small measure. No one's delusional enough to think it's going to solve it in one weekend. Certainly, I'm not trying to virtual signal here. I just felt that it was important to be part of it. And at 7 o'clock tonight, I'll be back to normal. And hopefully we don't have to do another one of these, but I suspect we probably will. So we'll see how that works out down the line.
And the reason the show is live a little later than normal, first of all, a lot of news this morning. Also, it's kind of like a case of the Mondays. I'm really happy everything's going well. I kind of slept too much, I think. I think that was the problem. It happens sometimes where everything you do is kind of like fun to do. You're having a great morning, but it takes you just a little longer than normal. And the benefit and also the detriment of doing the show ourselves is sometimes having a movable start time sometimes is not a benefit. But here we are. I'm here, and we're talking about the world of soccer and talking about news this morning. When TFC has done 2 roster movement this morning. Earlier in the day, it did send Liam Fraser, midfielder for Toronto FC, that did not see a whole lot of action earlier this year, but enough to be cap-tied in the CONCACAF Champions League, having played in the first game against Lyon as a substitute. He's not available for Columbus in the Champions League, but he will be in the league, and also he cannot play against Toronto, which might be useful down the line for Toronto, but Columbus does get a young midfielder for the rest of the year, Toronto gets his salary paid plus $50,000 of GAM, which they turned around, and apparently, according to Joshua Kloke of The Athletic, Toronto FC will be announcing later today Kemar Lawrence joining Toronto FC from Anderlecht, and we'll have more details on that later.
Yeah, let's start with the Fraser. This one, of course, got a lot of. This was reported by Josh Kloke earlier on the weekend as well. It's official now. Both Columbus and TFC sent press releases out this morning to announce it. 50,000 in GAM going back to Toronto for it as well, which I suspect was probably used for the transfer of the others. So these things don't happen in isolation. Why would Toronto do this? Liam Fraser was a guy that particularly headed into last season. A lot of people were saying this. Bradley's hurt. This is going to be his opportunity. This is a player that had that great game against the U.S. at BMO Field where he had to come in as a sub and was really, really strong, outperformed Michael Bradley in the game. There was a lot of hope and hype around him. At 23 now, though, he's just not playing. And it's difficult to see how he's going to find playing time at TFC based on the tactics that they're using.
Yeah. And then the emergence of Prizo, by example, and other young midfielders for Toronto FC that are clearly higher in the depth chart than Liam Fraser was for Chris Armas.
Yeah, for Chris Armas, and that's the key. And look, a lot of TFC fans he causes a lot of people to get upset. Fraser does. He's used as an example of how TFC misuses young players and misuses young Canadians in particular by a certain type of TFC fan, by a certain type of Canadian fan. So this is going to be a player that's going to get people having more attention put on him than maybe his playing time would warrant. It's funny and interesting that he's going to Columbus because obviously a lot of his emergence came during a time that Tim Bezbatchenko was around. So I think there's probably a connection there because you wouldn't necessarily think an interleague loan, which does exist. It is a mechanism that's underused in Major League Soccer. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that in the past, how maybe the team should be doing more of that. But normally you think of it as like TFC loans to like a team that's going to struggle to make the playoffs. If they're loaning it to a team that they believe that they're going to be in direct competition with, right? So this is a bit of a strange one that way, but obviously I think Bezbatchenko ranks him and maybe he fits their system a little bit better. We'll see. I mean, there also just, I think, is a friendly relationship between Columbus and Toronto. Ironically,
that's the thing. Well, that's probably where it is, right? Across the years in Major League Soccer, it's not about rivalry. It's not about people. It's actually about relationship, right? And the fact that you're a rival, but you encounter each other more often makes for easier negotiation, or just you're closer to your thoughts, right? That's what it's all about. Everyone's kind of like their island. As much as Major League Soccer is a league, and it's not like the other leagues where GMs are talking to each other, there's conference calls and stuff. It's a bit more insular in type of a league, and you're seeing sometimes teams having a better relationship with teams outside the league. We've seen clubs over the years having a lot of players coming from that pool of players, but you're right. Into the league, when it happens league-wide, inside the league, it is because there's a prior relationship. If you just look at also players coming back into the league sometimes, and it has to do with TFC, from Victor Vazquez to the rumored Jovinko back in LA, it's because of Greg Vanny. So I can see the relationship with people being a very big factor in how you get your transfer or your loan done and put it over the line.
Yeah, Jordan Hamilton went to Columbus as well. You remember a few years ago, which almost seemed like a favor more than anything else. And of course, in Jordan's case, he's now in India 11. He's out of the league. Fraser, this is a last chance for him, I believe. And I know that a lot of TFC fans are very eager to have this guy play and are very angry that he's not playing. I will give him a couple months in Columbus, and if he's not playing there, then at some point people have to go, maybe it's on the player too, right? Like there's other factors here. But just to finish your last fact, everyone talks about the great rivalry between Toronto and TFC in Montreal. What's the number one team that each other deals with over the years?
Toronto and Montreal. Yeah, from the time pre-MLS to the MLS times too.
Yeah,
And
and it's because of simplicity and relationships that they've developed and ease.
proximity.
It's easier to throw somebody on a via train than it is to get over a border and get an ITF, right?
Oh,
So there you
yes.
go.
And also, it's a lot easier for the family to be like, okay, we're just going to move 6 hours east, but, we don't have to change the entirety of the system we live in. So, makes a whole lot of sense. Now, earlier today also, and this has been, again, reported by Joshua Kloke from The Athletic earlier today, U.S. men's national team defender Kemar Lawrence, who spent a long time with the New York Red Bulls in Major League Soccer just a couple of years ago, he left for Anderlecht, and now rumored to be coming to Toronto FC. Toronto FC does need some help defensively. Is this a move that is motivated in your mind, Duane, by the results of the first few weeks, or how Chris Armas sees his team? Chris Armas, before taking over for Jesse Marsch in New York, was also in the system. He was the assistant of Jesse Marsch and has been the assistant while Kemar Lawrence was defender for New York.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and we just mentioned about how relationships play a role. Obviously, that's playing a role here. They're familiar with the player, and this is not the first time that they've sort of made a move in this regard. And I don't think this is necessarily anything to do with the early season results. No. If it was a center half, I'd be more inclined to say that was a reaction move. But I think this is a move that's been in the works for a while. That's just playing out now, and you've seen them collect all this allocation over the past couple weeks. They've been trading international slots, the loan of Fraser, moves like that to get them more and more. I don't think this is all that they're going to do with that either, because I do think that they are making a move for a center back that will come in the near future. I'm not sure it's the rumors that we talked about, or that I don't know if we talked about in the show, but that were out there last week. Because I don't really know much. I don't understand those rumors, so I'm not going to talk about them too much. Anyway. In this particular case, if you look at TFC's outside back situation, they just don't have a lot of them. They've been converting players to play back there that are more likely wingers. They only have 3 natural fullbacks right now on the roster, so this will be a 4th. Playing on the left side, Justin Morrow is not going to be able to play 34 games at full capacity. You wouldn't think. He's just on his final contract probably. So Lawrence comes in. He's likely the starter over there. This way, in the past, what they've been doing when they've had an injury in the left side is they've been plugging Laramée over there, who's a natural right-sider. Laramée, to his credit, has done quite well, but this is a better solution to that. Just an experienced player and another veteran player, another player that comes through the New York system, as we said. He does have a green card for the United States, so he should count as a domestic. That will make it a little easier. That's why TFC can dump their international spots so easily.
And also, if you interesting aspect of Kemar Lawrence career, did you know, Duane, that he scored at BMO Field before? Kemar Lawrence scored internationally 3 goals in his career. One of them was on September 9th, a nice and chilly evening at BMO Field. That's before the current renovation. I think that's 2 renovations ago, where it was really cold in the upper mid-bowl of Toronto FC. But this time around, he scored 1-0. The opening goal for U.S. against Canada on September 9th at BMO Field. This might not be the only one goal that he scores at BMO Field. Who knows? Maybe later this year, if Toronto has a chance to play at BMO Field, Kemar Lawrence could do the same. He could be a good addition to Toronto FC, but like you say, there's a big relationship not only with Chris Armas, but also Ali Curtis, and the New York Red Bull North are getting a player coming back home-ish, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I wrote this, I've said this, where I'm at the point now where I'm, my rope on Armas is short. I am a little bit concerned about their single-mindedness of how they seem to be collecting players, but that's, in fairness, every MLS team is like that. They get ideas, they get pathways, and they keep running them out regardless. And I'm going to give them time here. Again, when you're talking with TFC, you can't really truly handicap them until they have their best 2 players back in the lineup, and they haven't yet. We'll see where they're at.
And their new player also, because Jefferson Sausalito will be a big part of this team moving forward when he's available to play, which is not quite there yet, but it should be coming in the next few weeks. Speaking of coming, after this short break, we're going to review the weekend in Major League Soccer and look at some of the big narrative going on in the favorite circuit of Duane and I we follow on a daily basis, the quirky, fun, and interesting Major League Soccer.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kemar Lawrence with Duane Rollins. And yes, there was protest in Manchester. Old Trafford was invaded yesterday. Liverpool versus Manchester United was postponed. And we'll look at it more in details tomorrow, Duane, and at the possibility. And we'll have more reactions tomorrow. It actually is shocking the ownership group early today. They're just shocked, stunned, and the boat has been rocked. We'll see what happens and what the fallout of the protests are. But we wanted to mention it, of course, on the air, and we'll have more on the protest at Old Trafford tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much more to say. There's a lot of great coverage out there already. Obviously, the fans are upset about the Glazers and about the Super League and all that sort of stuff, and it was significant. I don't think it was a coincidence that they planned this both for the Liverpool game and also, when most of the teams were not on social media. So it all worked out that way. But we'll talk more tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's a coincidence when we look at that. In the world of sports, sometimes things make sense. Let's look at a couple of results from last weekend. It was a busy Saturday and Sunday. There was 13 games total on the weekend. There was 12 games. New York Red Bulls Chicago was how the weekend started, Duane, with a 2-0 win for the Red Bulls. Are Chicago going to be the actual wooden spoon contender this year?
Well, I think we both had them pretty low. I picked them as the wooden spoon. Look, they've got a couple pieces, but neither of those teams looked particularly good to start the weekend out. It wasn't your best weekend capper, or not capper, the first one out of the blocks, because it didn't really get you going with much excitement. But yeah, I mean, look, those are two teams that are not complete yet, we'll say. And that game, the first half in particular, was pretty dire, and moving on from it.
One game that was actually entertaining was Real Salt Lake Sporting Kansas City. The scoreline does not reflect the game. Sporting Kansas City did get a bit more chances than the scoreboard would say. I do not hate Pulido. I think Pulido has a lot of potential and a high ceiling of performance threshold with Kansas City. But Real Salt Lake, when they come back from behind and beat you 3-1, you gotta reassure your backline, as we say in good old English. You gotta stop your defense from leaking goals.
Yeah, well, that's been their problem for a couple of seasons now, Kansas City. RSL, they're playing behind all of their handicaps that they have out there in terms of their inability to build that team like anyone else because of the ownership problems, but yet they've gotten 2 wins already on the season. So, you've got to give them credit for that. I don't know how long that's sustainable, but, what do we say? Every week we got to say this during the roundup. Where are the points?
Points are on the board, points in the pocket. Also, when Duane mentioned the difficulties in roster building, let's not forget Real Salt Lake is actually managed at the higher level of this team. Basically, the front office reports to Major League Soccer, and the spending is down to a minimum, which is why we're not hearing a whole lot of designated player talk right now, to at least new big players coming into Real Salt Lake.
Yeah, they cannot spend any discretionary funds, which means that they are a team that fits entirely within the budget of Major League Soccer. That is significant. And they can trade TAM and stuff like that. They can move pieces to try and get a little bit more, but by and large, they are restrained by the budget. Most teams have the ability to go above that, right?
Yeah, well, the owner has the ability to
Yeah.
provide more, which in this case they won't, and that's the interesting aspect here. But like you mentioned, another win against a team that is touted to be a playoff team, at least in the Western Conference, Sporting Kansas City. Now we'll see if that actually happens. Speaking of playoff teams, speaking of teams that are having a better beginning of the season anticipated, but statistically speaking, I have to mention that, let's be careful here, Montreal is giving a lot of opportunity of scoring to the other teams in their games so far. But this time around, they kept a clean sheet against the defending champion, a worthy performance, even though some people would say there was some roster movement for Columbus heading into this game or rotation. They, of course, are in the CONCACAF Champions League, and they had a 2-2 draw last Wednesday against Monterrey, and they're playing this Wednesday, May 5th, back in Monterrey, this time against Rayados. But to me, Montreal were able to at least keep a clean sheet. It was the first time since last September that they kept a clean sheet. First clean sheet in 18 games, counting this one for Montreal.
That is a very half full way to look at it, for sure. Look, when you go to an art gallery and you look at all of the art on the wall, there are going to be some paintings that you really, really love and they speak to you. And there's going to be some paintings that you forget that you saw 2 seconds after you walk past them. And with all due respect, this
that's a second for you? Okay, are you talking about paintings because you watched a new thing on Netflix? I did. I watched it. This is a Robbery. Interesting thing in the Isabella Garden Museum in Boston. I forgot about that. I guess I had heard about it in the 90s, early 90s, when they stole like $1 billion of art from that museum.
Yeah, no, I have seen that. That's but it's just the analogy that popped in my head. I was looking at my own artwork, which is not exactly something that's going to ever hang in a gallery. It's Oasis, and I have some photos of their athletes with the heads of animals on them. Don't ask. Like Wayne Gretzky has a goat on his head. Anyway, that's my art. But nonetheless, that's the analogy. It wasn't a great game, but yes. Montreal got a point, and that's all that you. It's a home game. I'm using quotations when I say it, but
a home game in Florida.
Against Columbus, I think a point's fine.
Yeah, and that's going to be an advantage for Montreal because they are training in Florida on a daily basis. They're living in Florida for now. Playing in the heat is not as difficult for them, even though they're wearing a black jersey, which that's going to be so hot in July and June and July. But Montreal had 20 shots, but only 3 on target. That's a problem. But they kept Columbus to only 3 shots total and 0 on target. So that's a positive too. But like Duane mentioned, it's a 0-0 draw. Montreal still undefeated. Montreal 1 win in 3 games in the league. Houston, LAFC 1-1. A disappointing result for LAFC. LAFC so far in Major League Soccer since joining the league in 2018 has been a slow starter. Slow out of the gate, as we say. I'm not worried for Bob Bradley and LAFC. They'll have Diego Rossi back in form in a couple weeks. Vela's going to find the target. They're going to start scoring goals very soon.
Yeah, you'd think probably. I mean, you credit to Houston. They haven't been too bad. A little Canadian content there too, just to start the season. And I mean, Houston's got to scrap and take every point they can get, so they're gonna run away with that one with glee. LA, as you say, not exactly inspiring to start the year, which they didn't really have an inspiring year last year. People are blinded by a very, very, very short sample size when it comes to LAFC, and that would be in that CONCACAF tournament at the end where they, got within a half of winning the CCL, which is an accomplishment. No one's going to take that away from them.
Let's not forget they were like minutes from being eliminated too. So they went from almost being eliminated to going on a run in the CCL. That was quite interesting because they got trumped the first game and they did a great remontada on the second one.
Yeah, and I think this is one of our common themes on this show is when you're trying to evaluate, do not get blinded by very tiny sample sizes. It's or whether that be like a 2-game run or like, it's silly to even talk about standings and things like that right now or form because we're 3 games into the season. But I think when you're Houston, to get back to Houston here, to put LAFC on the shelf, I think they're going to be relatively fine because their top end talent is there. But that's a decent result for them, and we move forward with it.
Now, New England could not have done me a favor. No, they could not have started boo, unfortunately. But they still got the result 2-1 against Atlanta. I'm talking about my fantasy here. I'm really struggling, Duane, in my fantasy. I'm like dead last. And like an important league, too. Like the league of the podcast, of the host of TVA Spa. And I'm dead last. So I'm the laughing stock of the fantasy groups. And people are pointing and laughing at me. I need help. If you're listening, my DMs are open.
Yeah, this is why I don't do fantasy. Fantasy's not about knowing the sport, though. It's about knowing fantasy, which is a different thing altogether.
That's what I'm trying to tell myself to console myself. So hopefully it's working. And New England 2, Atlanta 1. Atlanta is going to struggle off the gate. It's under a new manager, totally different system. He doesn't know the league, and he has a certain stubbornness to his playing style, apparently. So it will be interesting. That's what I've been mentioned by a few of my colleagues in Atlanta. We'll see what happens with Gabriel Heinz at the helm, but this might be better than Frank de Boer. We'll see, but it's hard to top Tata, and I don't think Atlanta is going to be the same level as people think they are. I think Atlanta is still show me, don't tell me right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the preseason picks, I think I had them just in the playoffs, but by and large, this is a team that still has some pretty big holes on it now. And Joseph Martinez is a very, very good player, but to expect him to just parachute back in and all of a sudden all the problems of 2020 are fixed, that's a bit silly. And we're seeing it both with the results against Philadelphia in the CCL and then to follow that up with a loss here. Now, look, I'll say this as well. There's a pretty big commonality between the results of the CCL teams early season in the league. That's one of the reasons why it's hard to convince everyone in MLS that CCL is worth their time, because look at the results. They're not great.
Yeah, it's true. From Columbus to Atlanta, you're right. It's not going really well in the league. Also, Orlando 3, Cincinnati nothing. 30 seconds in, Canadian international Tesho Akindele puts Orlando up 1-0. Yeah, it's a very Cincinnati way to start a soccer game.
This game was, look, I watched this one live, and maybe it was the one I paid the most attention to because I like to watch train wrecks. Cincinnati.
What's better train wreck than Orlando, Cincinnati? Actually, Orlando know what they're doing this time around.
Well, look, it was bad, and I know that I haven't run my newsletter in a little while, and that's work related. But I am working on doing an article comparing and contrasting Cincinnati to the worst ever teams in Major League Soccer to try and make an argument that perhaps this is the worst ever Major League Soccer team that has ever existed right now, based on their start. I think, having lived the TFC experience in the early days, that this is definitely worse than TFC in the first 3 seasons of TFC. Now, whether they're worse than the next 3 seasons of TFC is the question, because people forget that TFC the first 3 seasons was just kind of normal bad, as opposed to terrible, terrible bad as the next 3 were. But anyway, I'm going to look at that. It was awful. Like, that could have been 7-0. It was just horrendous performance by Cincinnati. Brenner is not even visible. It's great to have a high-end talent up top.
But if you can't give him the ball, if you can't find a way to give him the ball, what do you want to do? And it's interesting you're saying that, because that's what we're seeing too with Cincinnati. And to me, it's the amount of passing. It's not low enough to be a big talking point to me. But looking deeper into the world of stats for soccer now with my day job, when you're in the 400s in MLS, I'm like, it's good, but it's not an indication of working towards that. It's just a symptom. To me, it's not necessarily the cause of your success. And that might be one of the places where Cincinnati will need more. But when you talk about creativity and identity in the middle, which is where they need to build that service to Brenner, are you going to have that under a Yap Stam system? To me, you might want to love all the pieces you have, but you can't try to put square pegs in round holes 11 times on the field or in all your position you have in your club.
Look, I mean, it's you also just can't defend as deep as they were for as long as they were with the players that they have and expect a result. You mentioned the 30-second goal there. That's, Nick Hagelin, God love him. We loved him here in Toronto. He was a great fifth center half. And that says it all. He was the fifth center half here, and he played some great backup minutes, had a good goal against Montreal in that famous game. But
Yeah. $400,000 of allocation were spent by Cincinnati to acquire Nick Hagelin.
And he had a great assist on that first goal. Unfortunately, it was concussion.
That was a very great assist. It's the famous, I'm going to give back the ball to my goalkeeper. Oh, wait, I did not put enough weight on it. And it's a goal for the opposing team.
We should mention Nanny's goal. Now, I question the defending on it as well, but whenever you turn someone inside out twice on the same play, break their ankles, as you say, and then put it in the top corner like he did there, you've got to give it credit for a potential goal of the year candidate already with that one for sure. So, look, Orlando looked great, but Cincinnati, more to the point, looked just absolutely horrendous. I remember a similar game against Orlando in the height of 2017 summer when TFC was at its very, very top rolling best in that championship season. They beat Orlando 5-0 at BMO Field, and that game reminded me of that in terms of just the sheer, they're just like a cat with a mouse playing with it, just batting around, not killing it, just kind of having fun with it. And that it just was that ugly. And you rarely see that in Major League Soccer. 3-0 doesn't do this game justice. And Cincinnati is in a lot of trouble already.
That's what I think too. I think Cincinnati will have a long season, and that's a benefit to probably every other Eastern Conference team in Major League Soccer. Philly, NYCFC getting their best result of the year so far with a big win against Philly. Philly, speaking of teams in the CCL struggling in the league so far in 2021, a perfect example, Philadelphia Union.
Yep. These are the teams in the CCL, with the exception of Atlanta, were among the best teams in the league last year, and all of them are struggling to start. Is that a correlation? I don't think so. What's correlation? Is it a causation? Is what I'm trying to say, and I do think so. And that's just part of the course, and you got to figure that out. I wondered how it would affect this season because I thought maybe that their extra games might help them in Major League Soccer originally, but now it's clearly going the other way. Unfortunately for all of them, there's enough room for them to escape, but I think any point that these teams can get is going to be great for them. New York is a tough team to get a handle on. They are. You mentioned in the last show or last time we did a review how your producer or somebody on the TBI Sportscast said that Nashville was what they used as sort of their median team.
Yeah.
I might put New York closer to that.
True.
In terms of rank average, because I don't rank Nashville, but that's a different story altogether. But that's kind of, they're difficult to place that way because they really, you don't know, like they can be good some weeks and not good other weeks. They were decent in this one, but is it as much Philadelphia not having the energy to compete and then having to go back out again this midweek? Yeah, it could be that too. Thankfully, this is the last week of CCL, so we.
Until the fall, yes. Until the continuation of the competition in the fall. But yeah, big win for NYCFC. Austin getting its second win in a row. Diego Fagundes scoring once again. Austin 1, Minnesota nothing. Minnesota, the Loon are flying low, but lower than normal. Like so low that they're in the water, but they're drowning. Minnesota needs some air because there's a lot of nothing on the board for Minnesota.
Well, if you've ever lived on a lake, you know that loons can dive very deep into the water to get those fish. So
yeah, but they forgot that the ice was still there, so they're stuck now and they're drowning.
Yeah, so we'll see. It's a very Canadian references we're going to have. Well, also Minnesota references, but Minnesota's practically in Canada. Like, I mean, if there's ever going to be, they always say we're the 51st state. They're more like the 11th province. Anyway.
Well, yes, that's true. Shout out to all our friends in Minnesota. From Brian to Jeff to Wes. Hi, guys.
Anyhow, I want to talk about Austin real quick. Not so much the team. I want to talk about that horrendous article that was appearing last week on Last Word for Sports. Guys, you're not special. You're not doing anything unique there. It's all good. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your first season. It's so adorable when they're young. If you're not familiar with that, it was all over the interwebs last week. Some poor blogger wrote that they were proving culture and all of the great stuff. And we're showing MLS the way. It's not an expansion team until someone proclaims that you are doing things better than the rest. Austin invented soccer last weekend. It was adorable and terrifying all at the same time. That's all I wanted to say. Good start for them. I had Austin in the playoffs in my prediction, so I'm not surprised by this. They're pretty
exactly.
deep.
That's what I thought too. And also, expansion team nowadays are getting a whole lot more help than the expansion team in our days.
TFC expansion.
Montreal,
I don't want to make
also.
excuses for them, but they had to carry 11 Canadians or something like that in that roster, which is something no other team had to do ever. So
Justin Braun started for the Impact on May 3rd, 2012. On March 3rd.
Different times back then. So, yeah.
FC Dallas 4, Portland 1. Interesting result here. We're not necessarily going to go that deep, but that is an indication here. Also, Portland looking at it like a team that also needs a little
rest.
Exactly. I was going to say a little break, a little Kit Kat. Need the Kit Kat break here. San Jose DC United. Yeah, we forgot to talk about the great karate kick goal by Caden on the game in New York. We can talk about Mr. Powell here, San Jose DC United, another 17-year-olds. Gone are the days when young kids were 24 in the league. Now you come at 17 and 18 and you can be a difference maker. From Busio in Kansas City, who's actually wants to play this year and he's showing his high ceiling, his high talent, to San Jose's young wonderkin at 17 too.
Yeah, and that's a good positive development for the league. We've seen it move that way for a while, and I think finally in the last year or so, it's not only gone that way, that people are starting to absorb it that way, to think about it in those terms rather than 22 young. No, not really. 22 is well established in most of the world. So if you want to play in the rest of the world, you got to think that way. I like the images with fans starting to come back in the stadiums, although it still makes me a little uneasy. I recognize that culturally speaking, it's not going to slow down in the States. So that said, if you're there and you're safe, I was happy to see that. There was images of the players in San Jose walking across that bridge in the back of the stadium.
That is amazing. That addition this year, that bridge, there's a concourse where the fans come out, and now they build the bridge so when the fans come out of the field, they cross that bridge, and you can safely walk. For the players, it's safe. I guess people, they don't social distance down there. But, the players are, and they throw jersey. What I'm wondering is how much money of jersey is that bridge walk going to cost? Because at some point, 4 games into the season at Avaya Stadium, or if I don't know if it changed name already, the sponsor are going to be like, guys, stop throwing your jerseys, okay? It's too much money.
If it stops, you'll know it's too much. Yeah, it's great. It looks a lot of fun, and it's something I applaud. I am going to say this. I'm going to be an old man just real quick here, an old man yelling at the club real quick. It's not a tradition when it happens once, guys. It's a couple people are, new tradition. Okay, let's just let it play out for a while before we put the T word on it. It's something fun that's happening right now.
Speaking of tradition, there's a new one apparently that started in Salt Lake, and that one's kind of funny in a way.
Kicking the ball in the crowd?
Yeah, a signed ball in the crowd. David Ochoa starting a new tradition. Kicking a ball in the crowd, a signed ball in the crowd after being fined an undisclosed amount the week earlier for kicking a ball, and it's not his stadium in the crowd. You know what? Why not? Why not? Go full in. Go all in. Own it.
Just that's fun. I'm surprised in a logistics. I can't say that word today. A society that sues people. That's the word I was trying to spit out. Anyway,
litigious.
There you go. Thank you. Society that they're gonna let that. Cause it's only gonna be one person breaks the leg chasing the ball and it's all done. But
exactly. Or one person receives the ball in the face and nose starts to bleed, and then a lawsuit for broken nose. Exactly. Speaking of lawsuits, or nothing's going to come out of this. Nashville enter Miami 0-0. And of course, the Higuain brothers our thoughts were with them. They lost their mother. They were not involved in this one. And I guess neither was Nashville and Miami.
Kevin, on Saturday, I decided to watch the Inter Miami Nashville game and the Montreal game. at the same time. So yeah, there you go. That was how I spent my time.
One of them was Sunday, so I don't know how you watched both together. But...
Oh, I was rewatching at the same time. I watched both of them in full. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it just felt like I was watching them at the same time because they were both, pretty dreadful. Miami, Nashville. Well, there's nothing to talk about. They didn't Nashville had some chances in it, but they just really don't have the punch. I think that after the first 2 weeks where they had allowed a couple goals in both, that they took a step back from whatever new system they were trying to get forward, and they went a little bit more back towards what was working for them, which is understandable.
Why not? But exactly. You can't expose yourself too much.
Yeah, and the result was they were a little lucky. Actually, the one talking point out of that, now it's coming back to me, was the Walker Zimmerman play where there's a dog shout on that. I think they got it right on the field. I know others might disagree. It was that kind of close, whichever way it got called. It certainly wasn't, if you're using clear and obvious as your threshold, it was not overturnable, and they did not overturn it.
Yep, exactly. The other interesting result on Sunday, Seattle 3, LA Galaxy 0. Rui Diaz with the brace here. Always an interesting result here. Seattle are starting the season well. They're not going to have Jordan Morris the entire season. We know what the type of injury he has. He's probably gone until maybe the mid of next season if all things goes well. But for Seattle, this is a good way to start your season for a team that usually starts slow, but for a summer that's going to be busy. And also, if you're looking at the difference of this roster and your veterans, you might want to have a few points on the points on the board, so that you have it in your pocket, so that you can maybe rest him later on if you're going to lose some player internationally this summer or more. And the weekend, of course, finished late last night with the Vancouver Whitecaps playing the Colorado Rapids. Vancouver deserving probably better than this scoreline, but also almost conceded a couple goals more. It finished 1-0 Colorado off a Diego Rubio golazo, Duane.
Yeah, it was a nice goal off the free kick. Look, maybe it was the end of the weekend and my attention wavering a little bit. I didn't find it the most compelling of games to watch last night. But nonetheless, I think if you're looking at it from Vancouver perspective, they continue to keep things tight. They continue to sort of show some small improvements. They need something in that middle. They need a creator to give Cavallini an opportunity to open things up and finish, because he's just not getting enough chances to do that, I think. As you say, they created some stuff. Maybe they're a little unlucky in the night, but that's just it.
3 clearance off the line for Colorado is where, to me, they got that luck. Yes, there were scramble moments in the box, and there was more than one player off the line for Colorado. Sometimes it was the keeper, and then there was 2 other players next to it. So, yes, Colorado was still managing in a way, but a very high percentage chance, you could say, for Vancouver. Dahomey should have probably scored, and Cavallini had an amazing chance, just a few feet wide, and a powerful header once again. So yeah, Vancouver was close. There was at least pathways to goal, if you understand what I mean. And I do not hate how they're playing. And defensively, Gaspar was there today. You can see what he brought. And Kai Alexandre was making his debut for Vancouver. He should have scored a goal there too. So yeah, you could look in a way that Vancouver did create a lot. Defensively, they were close. They're not their full selves yet. Crépeau did have to make a couple of very important saves. But it is encouraging for Vancouver. I see the progress there.
Yeah, no, there's progress. There's no doubt. They need another piece, and that's just the reality of it. But to go to the other game that we skipped over to maybe finish my thoughts on the weekend, MLS is a league in which 20-some teams compete over the course of 8 months, and in the end, Seattle wins.
Seattle, the Germany of the world of football, of Major League Soccer. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's my take on that one. No, I think maybe the Galaxy got slapped back to earth a little bit. They didn't have the toughest competition to start the season, and were flying a little high. And yeah, Vasquez came off and that game, and LA lost all of its creative energy. And
we're just telling me in my ear right now, Duane, Chicharito will not be the player of the week this week.
Well, you don't know that. Have you counted the votes?
Not yet, but in 45 minutes.
Guessing not. He should not.
Yeah, in 45 minutes, we will tally the votes, of course. But on that note, Duane and I will take a break for today. Come back tomorrow for the world of football with a soccer perspective. Tuesdays are for Europe. We'll look at Inter's Scudetto. Tomorrow we'll also look at Ajax win. We'll talk about Manchester and the protests. And we'll look at some games in Europe last weekend. Of course, until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kemar Lawrence, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. And as always, until next time, thank you to our patrons at patreon.com/sportspodcast network. We're working on the next edition of the Two Solid Two Soccer Podcast. This month, we'll have you with a brand new show on Canadian soccer. And Duane and I and everyone involved can't wait to have things to talk about, of course, at the national team level also. But thank you for your support, and to everyone who's been downloading in big numbers the podcast and watching us on Twitter and on YouTube. Thank you very much. But as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.